Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is life coach and LOA teacher Joel Elston.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
Joel and I were just chatting about what it's like to be in business and dealing with all the fun stuff that happens in business on a day-to-day basis. And most of it is actually pretty good, but every once in a while you have to deal with stuff that you don't like so much. And it can be challenging, and it can be there are lots of opportunities to get knocked off balance and so forth. Of course, what we talk about a lot here on the program is all the ways to stay on balance. And we have a topic today that I think is actually going to address that directly because, Joel, you actually posted about this, on Facebook and how you're taking a break from social media. And it occurred to me as soon as I saw it. Now I've seen you post that kind of thing in the past and you take breaks periodically and so forth, but it occurred to me that that's actually a pretty good way to regain balance. I mean, if we're in a place where, it doesn't have to be where you're a business owner. It could be just you're dealing with family issues or you're dealing with your usual job issues or whatever it might be. Sometimes you just have to take steps to rebalance. And what better way to do that than to take your attention away from all that stuff online that's driving you crazy?
Well, and I every now and then I probably take 2 or 3 breaks a year. Not always planned, but when I find myself, there could be around elections when all that drama is happening. We've had a lot of, turmoil across the world.
Oh, yeah.
That a lot of stuff was being brought to my attention that I just really, I'm not able to focus on. And I was just finding myself, I don't deal with anxiety, but when I feel myself a little out of balance or thinking about things or being occupied and, social media for me, anybody that follows my Facebook or my Instagram is very, there's no drama. It's just positive stuff. It's law of attraction stuff. It's my life coaching business. I don't do politics. I delete comments that get off balance. And, but yet even within that, just seeing what everybody else is going through, and a lot of suffering and a lot of stuff. And, sometimes your energy is picking up on that. We've done multiple shows on, how when you watch something on TV, when you see something being bombed on TV or you see, horrid events, horrific things that have happened, that registers subconsciously as a real event. And so one of the biggest things is our brains are constantly being programmed. The stimulus that we're looking at, we're paying attention to, we're reading about, all that stuff is programming our brain and our reality. Most of it's taking place subconsciously. So being aware where that programming is coming from, and when I find myself sort of a little off balance, that's one of the first things that I do is shut social media down. And to be fair, I said a social media post, but I'm on Instagram still because Instagram to me has a different vibe than Facebook. I don't have much engagement on Instagram. I just post stuff and I don't get engagement. Whereas Facebook, there's a lot more engagement and you can control your news feed really. It's a lot easier on Instagram for me. So, so that's where I'm at. But I just find it, I don't like my world to get unbalanced. And I find that one of the factors that is social media sometimes that allows me to get refocused. It allows me to step away. And, I'm not making some great political statement. I will never allow myself to be programmed by social media. And if I find myself on the edge of that taking place, I'll take a break from social media or delete it entirely. It doesn't really occupy that much space in my brain.
Yeah, that's a really good policy to follow too, because let's be honest. I think we all, to some degree, have this belief that, it's not going to affect me. And I think, honestly, it comes from the world of entertainment. I mean, yes. For instance, if you're a horror movie fan, the horror movies don't really affect me. I'm just watching it for, the entertainment value of the screams or whatever. But it does affect us.
It does.
It affects us in ways we don't even recognize sometimes until it's too late. I know for myself, I can be focusing on something. It could be news, it could be social media, it could be some sort of entertainment vehicle. And only after focusing on it for a while do I realize, all of a sudden, I kind of feel heavy right now.
Yes.
And my outlook just, I mean, everything seems so dimly right now. Everything seems so, it's like my hopes for the future have kind of disappeared. What the heck? And all because I was focusing on stuff that I really didn't like very much from the perspective of I wouldn't want that in my life, but simply I was focusing on because of the entertainment value. How odd.
Yeah. And that's being aware that, we take in, and I forget this exact stat, I wasn't prepared to look it up, but in one day, in one 24-hour period, in 2023, we're exposed to more information and stuff, just stuff to take in than the entire year than 1,750. It just one day's worth. But back then it was a
Hey, Joel, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. For whatever reason, your signal's breaking up on us, and it's getting very choppy. I'm not sure if there's anything you can do about it at your end, but it was getting hard to even understand what you were saying, so that's why I figured I'd interrupt.
Thank you. They're working on our cable here in the neighborhood, so that might be what's going on.
That's possible.
Yeah.
Well,
I can try to switch over to phone only with that works better.
Well, why don't you give it a shot? Try switching over. Let's see if it makes a difference. I'll talk to the audience for a moment here while you're doing that.
Okay.
And I mean, anything we can do to make it sound better, because we want to be able to hear you. We want to understand what you're saying. When we can't understand you, it doesn't work so well. So anyway, while Joel is connecting there, let's see. A couple things I wanted to share. First of all, as we are approaching, here he comes. Well, then I'll save those for later. All right. So give us a little test. How are you sounding right now?
Oh, okay. This is all on just the phone service. So
that's actually really good. Much better.
Okay.
Yeah. I can hear that real clear. Okay.
Good. So we'll stick with that. So, but again, as I was saying earlier, when we get in these, my mood dictates everything. So when I'm feeling off, I do a checklist of what could possibly be. If I feel sort of a low-key anxiety, because there's a narrative right now that if you watch out there, because when all this stuff started breaking, I was paying a little bit of attention to it. And, I find myself, well, what happens if this happens? What happens if this happens? Will World War III happen? And it's like, all of that is out of my control. And I don't need to place any energy toward it. And so I'm always on a news media blackout, but I'm on a double super secret news media, none of it now. Just like, Animal House, double secret probation.
Right.
That's what I'm on. So I don't partake at all. And in fact, a lot of well-meaning people who are often posting good stuff on, they believe, it's just a reminder of what's going on. So stepping away is a really good tool to measure where you're at. And if you have a hard time stepping away from social media, that should tell you something as well.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I mean, it could tell you a couple of things. It could tell you, first of all, you may have a little bit of an addiction going on.
Yes.
It could also tell you that you have allowed yourself to not only get programmed, but to get programmed into a track that is consistently against what you like and what you want and what you desire for your life. You could actually be working against yourself on a regular basis.
Yes. Because when you look at everyone else's stuff, and, a lot of people will look at somebody else's postings and everybody's posting these spectacular vacations or their brand new houses, brand new cars. The old saying, you're watching their highlight reel and you're watching the best of what's going on. So you start to have a feeling that everybody is somehow thriving or doing far better than you are. And that starts to chip away. How come this guy gets so lucky? Or how come this guy got a brand new car? And comparisons start, and that leads to, comparisons are really a quick way to resentment, and expectations not being met, being angry with yourself. So social media offers a lot of quality stuff, but it also brings to the table, stuff that we weren't aware of when it first came out. I don't know if the world is better because of social media or not. I can, it's not my place to judge. I think I love information. I love what the internet has brought us, all this information. But social media has emboldened some extremes. It has taken people who needed to stay hidden and allowed them to not be hidden anymore and give their voice. It's the social media allows for extremists to, hey, I feel the same way you do, and let's start connecting. Then one isolated person runs into 500 isolated people who become a group of 1,000, and then it grows.
Right. Yep, and that's the way it works. There's also, like you said, because it's a load of information that comes through. I was having a conversation just a couple of days ago with a woman who was concerned about the great political divide. And I won't get into the divide itself. I'll just point out that's something that a lot of people are very concerned about. And I told her that, well, I'm a political science major, so I know something about political history and so forth. And I assured her that the political divide that's going on right now is nothing compared to what was going on in the 19th century. I'm sorry. Yes, 19th century, right. 19th, yeah. I mean, but we never knew about it. I mean, most people, right. If there was like some sort of a corruption thing going on or some sort of a massive, issue going on of some kind, it would show up in a newspaper article 2x4 on page 3. I mean, that's all you'd ever see about it. So you weren't inundated. Whereas today, with the 24-hour, 7-day-a-week news cycle, you can't get away from it. The same kind of stuff, but it just kind of flows in continuously. It's a very, very different atmosphere. But if you actually look at the depth of the corruptions and the divides and the craziness that went on politically, my God, it makes today look tame by comparison. It's just that Americans didn't know about it.
Well, I also have a theory that because of that reason, people could operate, and if you said something and there was no way to prove it or fact check it or whatever, it just became reality. One of the things for me, and again, I'm truly not getting into politics, but I am trying to give an example of this is strictly an opinion of mine. But when I was a young man and I was interested in the Kennedy assassination, John Kennedy's assassination.
Right.
And so you know me, I go on deep dives into things, and in school, we kept seeing this Zapruder film. I think that's what it's called, of him being shot.
Right.
But yet I'm reading what the report is saying, that, this person, from the library or whatever, book depository, it shoots Kennedy from the back. And then, and clearly the film shows him going forward. And then there's a inexplicable moment of his head's going back and the back of his head comes off and his wife's chasing that on the thing. So as a kid, I'm going, okay, well, where did that come from? But they're telling me that was only one shot. And I'm only giving an example.
Right.
So years of me watching this, now they try to tell me that this bullet actually hit this, turned around, came back, and then had the impact do that. Well, forensic scientists have said, no, that just wouldn't possibly happen. So at the end of the day, I don't know what happened, but I know what they're telling me didn't happen, at least from my opinion. Okay. And the only reason that matters is if that's the case, because it's irrelevant now who did what or how it happened, but how much other things have they shaped in history and just said this happened and we accepted it blindly?
Oh yeah.
And so, and that's just the point. So it isn't that I'm this conspiratorialist, or it's just, I know human nature, and way back in the day, they could say this is what happened, and that just got recorded in history as what happened. We don't know if anything really happened the same way they said. And
I don't know who originally came up with it, but if you break the word history into 2 parts, you get his story.
His story, yeah.
And that's essentially what history is. History is the story of, what happened from the perspective of whoever wrote it down.
Yes.
Whoever recorded that particular bit of history. And that's kind of a challenge when you think about it, because it means that if your perspective matches that of the person who's giving the report, well, then you're good. But if your perspective is different from that person, all of a sudden what that person wrote isn't resonating the same way with you as it would have with him. And then there's also people pointing out, well, what about her story? And so now you have the whole gender thing going on there. So you have a lot of different ways that you can really realize that perspective plays a huge role in this. Now, if we have an entire society of people who are largely oriented toward negative orientations, what kinds of stories are we going to get out of that? What kinds of stories are we going to be passing along to ourselves, to each other, family members, friends, and so forth? And I think it's pretty obvious we're going to be passing along stories that are pretty negative because that's what's being created.
And yes, and this is the piece that imagine this. Okay, let's say there's a reporter that travels back in time, uh, and they pick two random people to describe. Tell us about the state of the world and your country right now.
Mm.
And let's say one of those people were me.
I'd read that one, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, if you wrote that book, I'd read it.
Yeah. So, but I would tell this person, I said, we live in the greatest time of opportunity. We have access to all the information that ever existed. There's multiple opportunities to gain wealth. There's connection. We have, I would be pointing out all that's right. I have never felt so excited about the future. That would be and me, that's my scenario of what I believe is going on, and my reality matches that.
Well, that's why I read it, because I know what I'm getting. When I'm getting, I would love. I'd be resonating like, oh yeah, I love this. Give me more.
Yeah, but then the reporter then would go get someone else who is not happy with what's going on, and they would be saying, oh, the country's this, that, we're on the brink of doom. All this is going on. And then this reporter goes back to the future and publishes those stories. They're entirely different based on the perspective of the people you talked about. So as you're saying history, his story, her story, as you're going back in time, a person is writing that with their bias. So again, we don't know what really happened. We just simply know what was reported. And that is not to upset anybody or create any drama. What I am saying is knowing that we're being programmed, and the people and corporations all have a bias, and being aware of that. And that's why it's, I'm the ultimate guy, march to the beat of your own drum. Figure out, get your information the way you want to get it. My reality is much different than many people's reality. And they will think that I'm naive or I'm denying the truth. I cannot stress enough. My personal reality is I am very healthy. I have an abundance. I have a great life. I love my life. I have a great career. I work with incredible people. That's my reality. It's not made up. It's not fake. I've created that reality to become my pure, real reality. And that's what's happening.
Yeah, exactly it. There's also the fact that we all perhaps think of it as we're living in this time right now where all these things are going on. But in fact, there's a war going on way over there, and there's a terrible calamity going on over here. And then over here, there's a friend of mine who's just painted her house. And over there's one of my clients who asked me to fix their garden. And then there's the person over there who just lost his job, but the person over there just got a huge promotion. And you begin to realize, even in the current time, the diversity of stories is large. I mean, we're talking about a massive diversity of stories all going on at the same time. So here's the question: which one's the true story? And I think the answer is all of them.
They all are. Again, the famous book that many people start the law of attraction journey with is called Think and Grow Rich. It's by Napoleon Hill. And the reason of that book, the whole point of that book, is he was commissioned to go. There was a group of people, quite a significant group of people, that during the Depression in 1930s or whatever that was, that became wealthy during the Depression. Mm-hmm. And it was a small group, but they became very wealthy. And he was commissioned to go find out why this elite group of people were successful, and while the masses were not. And the goal was to find out the commonalities of these successful people to be able to eventually teach that strategy. And Napoleon Hill interviewed all the giants of the day, and he said, he was looking for that one answer, and he said, I could find no commonalities. There were some really smart ones. There were some incredibly stupid ones. There were some very organized ones. There were some ones that just had no clue what was going on. He said some of them, had different management styles. Some of them, no matter what he came up, he couldn't find one belief or commonality until he found the one belief they all shared. They all believed they were going to be rich.
Mm.
That was the only commonality. And he concluded that's what started this way of thinking. It's the environment. They became wealthy during the worst time ever. They fought against the narrative that everything's shot. There is nothing. The economy's done. You can't, there's people standing on the streets waiting, for anybody to come up and offer them any kind of a job. And there's other people going out and filling needs and creating, in the middle of the worst time to ever develop a business and becoming just magnificently wealthy. Mm-hmm. And it was their perspective that determined that. So while all this matters, in the influence of social media and the 24-hour news cycle, it has really changed our perspective. We've talked about September 11th before, how the repeat of seeing that plane fly into that building over and over and over and over and over, and how each time we were traumatized by that horrible event. And the subconscious brain, it feels helpless. It feels like there's just no hope.
Yeah, exactly it. Yeah. So there are a few things we can take away from this. I mean, you know me, one of the questions I always ask is, okay, so what can we do to change this? How do we change our perspective in the face of this, wall of negativity coming our way? But we've actually started to answer the question already, because we just described how, well, if you keep looking at the same horrific scene over and over again, you're going to get programmed the way you don't want to be programmed. By logical extension, if I change the scenery, I can program myself differently.
Right. Absolutely. And that's be guarding what you allow into your programming. And where it's coming from and who it's coming from and all that. I was on a conference call earlier, and it was, just one of these really annoying calls. And there's one person who just dominated the entire conversation, just talked and talked and talked and talked and talked.
Yeah, we've been on those calls, all of us, I think.
Yeah, and I was sitting there, I'm getting paid the same amount of money to be on the call if he's talking or I'm talking, and it wasn't that I needed to talk. It's just the call was basically done, and he just kept recapping and recapping. Mm-hmm. And as I was sitting there, I found myself, again, I use my emotions as a guidance sail. I'm getting frustrated. And, so I basically, I was just there. It was a Zoom call, but I did not have my screen on, and I just muted everything, and I just went about doing other things. I just went on the computer and, I was monitoring, but not really monitoring. And then when I heard a break in that rant, I just hopped right back on in. But I just had to stop the program. He wasn't saying anything that was terrible. It's just that it was an annoying rhetoric that he just kept saying over and over and over and over. And it was very frustrating. And I can't allow that to continue. So I couldn't leave it. So I just shut it down.
So very key phrase that you just used right there is one to draw upon. I can't allow that to continue. Yes. Because most of us do. Most of us, whatever the thing is, whatever the it is, we allow it to continue. But we don't have to. We can choose not to. We don't have to offend anybody all along the way. We don't have to, throw water in somebody's face or something like that. We can just not allow it. Say, nope, thank you. Yeah.
Well, and when it comes to just family historical stuff, when things are handed down, this is our family story, and okay, that's your family story that and then when it's handed down, it's like, oh, wait a minute, when we find out that's not exactly how. That's how you wrote it, but that's not how it really is, and it can take place anywhere. So that's the importance of, when you realize this isn't about saying that you shouldn't seek information, you shouldn't do that, but just understand that here we talked about this in various studies. This is what I love. If I'm constantly looking into studies into muscle growth and nutrition and all these things. There are, for every study suggested one method being a superior method, there's another study totally going the opposite way.
I always love that. Isn't that something how that works?
It is literally the opposite. And what they take out of the account of it, what and science doesn't like this, we've talked about this, is it frustrates the scientific community. But the truth is, bioindividuality and beliefs play a big role in what happens.
Mm.
What my body requires to grow muscle and to get stronger, the same basic concepts are there, but it might be different than you.
Mm.
I really believe this. There's this doctor in London that claims to, and I like the concept, whether he can do it or not, but he does this set of blood tests, and he can determine by your blood makeup and your genetics what type of diet would work for you best.
Mm-hmm.
Where would carnivore work for you? Would it be vegan work for you?
Yeah.
And he's been very successful with that, and he has a lot of explaining, because I have tried a vegan diet very briefly, to be fair, and it was horrid. It was
Mm.
just it was torture. It was my body did not like that, and I've also
Mm-hmm.
tried a carnivore diet where it's just all meat. Didn't like that either. You
Yeah, they're
know,
both pretty
uh,
extreme.
yeah, and I've tried them both, but yet I tend to be higher, I higher protein, quality fats, and low but not depleted carbohydrates, lower
Mm-hmm.
carbohydrate.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I function best on. But I've done that through trial and error. That's where my best is,
Yeah.
and that might not work for you, Walt. So the idea that the bioindividuality and the preferences and how your individual makeup influence a lot of this is often not taken into account, and that's the problem. That's where the rub comes in, where so everything that's going on, your reality, your security, all of that is based on, when you have a group of people all saying the same thing, you start moving your mouth and saying that the herd mentality is not a healthy thing sometimes. And,
Mm.
that social media encourages that.
So tying back to social media, I can take a couple of lessons from this. One lesson I can take from it is that by recognizing the pattern of what I'm experiencing through social media, I can recognize it a number of different ways, but the easiest and most effective way, I think, is through how do I feel about it.
Yes.
So in other words, my feeling becomes my guideline.
Yes.
And if I'm engaging in looking at something on social media or a lot of things on social media, or looking at the same kind of thing over and over on social media, I can take a quick barometer reading, excuse me,
Yes.
of, how I'm feeling. And
Yes.
if it feels great, good, keep going.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if it doesn't feel so great, reconsider,
Right.
change the
So,
channel, turn the channel
yeah,
off, pick a different kind of channel.
completely. And I shared the story multiple times in my life where, uh, when I grew up in a small town in Florida, that, we had, there were two religions, and they're really basically the same thing. You had the Methodists and the Southern Baptists. The Methodists
Mm.
were a little less crazy. And
The way
so,
you say that.
yeah, I mean, they were a little less, but we fought hard. Now, I was on the Southern Baptist team. And and this is me personally, I'm not critical of anyone else's religion. I'm saying for me, um, I really felt a connection with a being, a higher power, a God. I really did.
Mm. Uh-huh.
Um, but that version of that never resonated with me. I just said, no, that didn't fit for me. And, I always felt a strong connection with God. I believe in God, but I don't believe in what that story was telling me. Again, my opinion.
Sure.
And, then when, the concepts of the law of attraction came, instantly I was able to go, okay, there it is. There it is. It, I knew it, but it was told to me. And
Yeah.
once I saw it, it was, I researched it, and you and I have been through the law of attraction journey together many
Oh, yeah.
years. We've done that, and we've both have come a long way with understanding it. And it's just an amazing tool to have. And that doesn't mean that any of our listeners are required to believe the way I believe. That's
Nope.
not remotely what I'm suggesting. But again, we live in a society where the social media sort of we're trying to rally the troops to this position or this understanding, and not taking into account the individuality of it all.
Yeah, I agree with that entirely. In fact, it just occurred to me, you mentioned Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. In the early years of the podcast, that was a book you and we basically tore it apart chapter by chapter, going through, well,
Yeah.
what is this talking about? What's that? And I don't remember what the exact chapter was, but there was one chapter we looked at, we said, no, we're not even going to talk about that one. Because it just didn't resonate with us.
Yeah. And I love Think and Grow Rich, but at the same time, at the time, it was the material that we had because it was basic, and then we used The Secret, and then we got into the Abraham Hicks stuff and the other stuff we got into. But not all of Think and Grow Rich resonates with me, and a lot of the concepts do, but not all of it does. And I wish I remember the chant, because one of them was like that. We're not even going to talk about that. We just skipped that entire chapter.
We skipped it so effectively and efficiently, we don't even remember what it was.
Yeah. We literally deleted that. So, but it was such.
I remember what it was. I remember what the chapter was about, channeling sexual energy. That's what it was.
Yeah, that one was one you and I were we going to do a show on channeling sexual energy? We'll just leave that one on the.
We'll just pass that one. Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, that chapter, it does not really fit the rest of the book either. So
it doesn't. No, it's kind of odd.
Yeah, it's like, okay, what were you thinking there when you wrote that one? It's like,
not really sure. Yeah.
But again, it's a great book, but it's the concepts that lead, to us thinking. But the early when I was listening to, or as you know, I listened to a lot of books, originally reading, but listening to The Law of Attraction, with Abraham Hicks.
Mm-hmm.
And my biggest thing, and our friend Dr. Ken, who shows up with us occasionally, was instrumental in this. He's the one that introduced me to Abraham Hicks.
Okay.
And I had the hardest time with the channeling concept.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, look, everything they're saying is awesome, but why can't they just not say that piece? Just move on. And and he basically said, why don't you read the book and just don't, it's usually the introduction chapter. Just skip that.
Right.
And then read everything else. Just listen to it on the surface of what they're saying. Well, it was so on point with everything. I was able to do that. And then later, it just dawned on me. I get the channeling. I understand the source energy. I understand it's the connection, and I truly believe in it all now. But it sort of kept me from believing. That's the one piece that kept me from buying into it. Early, very early.
Yeah. And I think we all run into things like that when we find something new, some sort of resource that resonates with us on some level, especially if it resonates in a big way. But I can't ever think of anything that I've encountered where I agreed 100% with all of it.
Yeah.
And if I'd actually followed the idea, well, I don't agree with a piece of it, so I'm going to skip the whole thing, I would never have read anything. I'd be like the dumbest person on the planet because I wouldn't have consumed anything.
Well, and for a lack of a better term, with all the wonderful teachers and gurus of the law of attraction that espouse the law of attraction, they all have, it's not all the same. And some people have different views of it, and it's okay. I believe it's like everything else. It's what works for you. And one of the biggest things, and we've talked about this probably 100 times over the years, I've never been a big believer is I'm going to sit on my couch and manifest me a new life.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I've never been in that camp. I'm not saying it's impossible, but since I don't believe it's possible that way, it doesn't work for me. I'm an action-oriented person. I believe I need to set my goals, my intentions, and my actions need to match toward that. And that's how I manifest things in my life, taking action.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what works for me. I'm not denying that other people may be able to sit in their house and somebody stop by and drop off a $10,000 check. That may happen. But it's never remotely come close to happening to me. However, when it's never failed when I took action with intention. I never failed, ever.
That's an important point.
Yeah.
Because the reason you didn't fail, like you said, is because you believed you wouldn't.
Yes. and that's really important. So it's that's why all of this that we're talking about, and it started out with the social media, but it just also is how our brain is processing. And when you're around other people, the exchange of energy or the exchange of ideas, or how there are some people who will just go along with the crowd because that's what they believe. I work with a few preachers that are roughly locally. I don't want to get too specific, but they're
Sure.
not far from here. And these gentlemen have been preachers for a long time, like over 20 years,
Hmm.
and they feel that their belief system is much different than when they started, and they
Mm.
don't like where their churches have gone, but
Ah.
yet they are they're a few years away from retirement, where they're going to be vested to get their retirement from the church. So they're
Mm.
having to stay in the church and stick to the dialogue, which they don't believe in.
Yeah,
And that's a hard way to live,
it is.
yeah, but again, it's because the masses in the church, which pay the preachers, are saying, you will do our doctrine, whether you like our doctrine or not. And,
Hmm.
it's not that they're saying that, they're assuming he likes the doctrine or he wouldn't be doing it, but he's like, I cringe when I have to talk about these things.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah,
It also occurs to me that when we're talking about the influence of social media, and like you said, it really is influences coming from all kinds of sources, because social
sure.
media is not the only source that we have that inundates us on a regular basis. When we're talking about these patterns of whatever it is that we're being exposed to, it's very easy to forget how much control we have over it. I mean, we've been talking here about a number of different ideas of, well, we can take control when we want to. We can change the program. We can do all this other stuff. But when we get out into the real world, we kind of forget that sometimes. And there are a lot of people
Yeah,
who just don't even know it.
right.
I think that's kind of what you were referencing when you said there are people who just kind of go with the crowd.
Yes.
I would call it a default behavior.
Yes.
I accept certain things by default because that's what I've always experienced, or that's what I've always heard, or that's
Yes.
what's always been presented to me. And the reason I think this is an important thing to kind of harp on is I think about what has been talked about where, the RAS, the back end of the brainstem in the
Right.
back of our heads is concerned, because what they've learned, what scientists have learned, is that is really where a lot of programming takes place. And the programming is based on where we give our attention.
Yes.
The example I always like to give is somebody who just went and bought themselves a new car. For the first time ever, they bought themselves a Honda. They used to have Chevys and Fords, and they bought themselves a Honda. And suddenly, everywhere they go, there are Hondas. There are far more Hondas than there ever were before. Well, actually, there
Absolutely.
aren't any more Hondas than there were before, but because their programming has now been altered by where they're giving their
Yes.
attention, they're seeing a lot more Hondas than
Yes.
they were ever seeing before.
Yes.
So when I think about it from that perspective, I say to myself, wow, that's really empowering. Because now all I really need to do is change where I'm giving my attention, and I'm going to get more of that thing in
Right.
my conscious awareness. So I literally can choose when I'm going to and what I'm going to reprogram myself to, simply by picking what it is that resonates with me better and then paying more attention to it. It really does
Yes.
work that directly. And the brain
Yeah.
reinforces it. The brain actually makes that happen for me.
And that's why a lot of people find vision boards appropriate, helpful to be able to help program.
Right.
Uh, there's other methods as well. There's a thing called Mind Movie, where you create movies in your brain, playing things
Yep.
backwards and forwards. Uh, uh, there's a gratitude list. There's a million different ways, but all of those are trying to do the same thing. They're trying to program, uh, the reprogram the areas that aren't what you want with new stuff, and it's really effective. And it's hard sometimes, because when you have a belief system that is, even if you're presented with absolute unequivocal is the word there, facts that just absolutely support the opposite of what you believe, you just want to argue with that. It just can't be.
Mm.
And when in reality, you have to accept things that, wow, I didn't know that. there's some assumptions that you have over the years. Like, okay, I didn't know that. You got at some point just be able to say, yep, I'm wrong. I've been wrong with that for a while.
I know for myself, one of the best breakthroughs I made personally was when I decided to stop fighting things I disagreed with.
Yes.
I don't always succeed with that, by the way. So I still sometimes end up fighting, but I do it a lot less than I used to.
Right.
And I don't even remember exactly how it was I made that shift, where that tipping point was. But wherever it was, from that moment on, boy, did my life get easier.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, just so much easier. All of a sudden, all the stress, it wasn't gone entirely, but let's say it was reduced 80%. I mean, it's that dramatic a difference just because I decided to stop fighting.
Yeah. But it's amazing when you do that, the idea that for so long when I used to use the word, I really became happy when I resigned from the debate team, because if you and I disagreed on something and I was convinced I was right, I would go to all lengths to prove you wrong. I really would. It would occupy my brain to that. Yeah. Right now, when you're wrong, Walt, I just let you be wrong. You're welcome.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it doesn't entertain your brain very often, but
I'll just move on from that. But all kidding aside, it's not worth. You're a dear friend of mine, and so if I ever really, and I wouldn't, we've never ever had an argument of any type, but I would never risk your friendship over an argument or a disagreement or any of that. So I would, if you're adamant about something that I disagreed with, I might let you know I just disagree with that. We'd move on. It would be fine. It wouldn't affect our friendship.
Yeah, I don't think there have been times where we've disagreed about stuff, but I can't ever remember any time where it became heated.
Oh, of course not. And I mean, the only ridiculous thing you like is baseball. Besides that.
I don't know how to break this to you, Joel, but there are a lot of things I like that are ridiculous. Baseball's only one on a list.
But it is the most ridiculous. So I'm just letting you know that. Yeah.
Oh,
but we've always had baseball argue about. But all kidding aside, sort of the premise of what we're discussing, of all of this, and we get back to this. The last few weeks, it's almost become our regular thing to talk about. What we're talking about is the most effective thing is when you identify that your emotions are off, that there's an anxiety, that emotional guidance scale we talked about before is your greatest tool in the law of attraction, life in general.
It really is.
When you feel these emotions are off, it's like a free diagnostic. You don't have to know what it is. Just know where wow, something's going here, and I need to adjust from that emotion. I need to move up that scale a little bit.
And to be perfectly honest, I mean, in the past, I would have been really kind of, I won't say freaked out, but very earnestly interested in, well, how did I end up there? Where did that come from? And so forth. And what ultimately kind of, I won't say it settled it for me, but it gave me a lot of release and satisfaction, let's put it that way, was recognizing that whatever it was that I was feeling, all I had to do was look back within like a day or so. And that's where my best clue was. Yeah, there was probably stuff that happened before that too, but it was probably pretty recent. There was something going on. It didn't have to be necessarily related, but if I looked at whatever that thing was or whatever that experience was or that thought pattern or whatever it was I was doing within the last almost there. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, what happened there? That was weird.
I think my browser just went kablooey. I had to reboot the browser.
Okay, well, I guess that's, are we back on the air?
We are? Yeah. Well, we never left. You were actually on the air all along. I was off. Yeah.
Well, I did ask you.
When you were saying, that's what everybody was hearing, but that's all right.
Okay. I posed the question, if it was being broadcast, I posed the question, did Walt just disappear? I mean, so I didn't know everybody heard that. So I'm not crazy, but I was pondering, did you just trans, just go to the next plane maybe for a moment? I don't know. I didn't know where you went.
Well, but Scotty might have beamed me up. I'm
There you
in
go.
outer
Something
space,
could have happened. Yeah. Yeah. But anyway, we're back. So, but this is, the beauty of all this is we get to do these things. You figure these things out. And at the end of the day, you're in charge of your reality when you figure these things out. You're in charge of your happiness, and using tools like shutting social media down, going on news breaks. If there's certain people that trigger you, it's okay not to be around those people, no matter who they are.
Yeah. That's part of it, isn't it? We need to give ourselves permission.
Yeah,
We need permission to not engage with the people that aren't really feeding our soul.
absolutely. That's important. We don't think we have permission to do that sometimes.
We often don't. Yeah.
And sometimes these people might be family members. Sometimes they might be people that historically you thought, well, I can't do that. But you can step away from anybody that's not everybody's going to be on your side. Not everybody's going to get you. And if people aren't supportive, I used to believe that there were three classes of people were in your order. There's people that actually opposed you. There's people that were neutral, and those that support you. And my goal was to be neutral or supportive. Well, I removed those just neutrals, and I just have supportive, because neutral doesn't bring me any, or I bring them value either. But having people that are your people around you, that are in support of what you're doing, that do lift you up, that are rooting for you, so to speak. They're not not the ones that are just okay. And it's really important, because the people you surround yourself with, as I've always said, they have a greater influence than you realize.
Yes.
How they affect your life, because your belief system. I'm around positive people that are. I'm not with a group of people any longer that talk about other people. The group of people that I'm talking to are talking about next level stuff. What's next? The science of all this, excitement stuff. I don't have somebody that's gossiping about this other person. If somebody's in that orbit that in our group that starts that, they're out of the group. You don't talk about other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good point. In fact, as you were describing that, I was just remembering an incident that occurred in the last week. I had a date. I was, talking with this woman. We were just having some coffee and getting to know each other and so forth. And she made the observation that I seemed very comfortable in my own skin. And as soon as she said that, it instantly dawned on me, well, that's because of the podcast.
Yes.
I've been doing this podcast for 11 years, a lot of those episodes with you. And as time has gone on, I've learned a few really important skills through the podcast. One of the skills I've learned is appreciating the value of perspectives that aren't my own. A second one that I've learned is I actually can take action in my own life to change my narrative, to change the storyline that I'm experiencing, to change my friends. I mean, like you just said, I can actually decide who I'm going to pay attention to by not spending time with certain people and spending time with other people.
Absolutely.
I mean, I can make that selection. And the action of making that selection is one of the main things that helped me feel comfortable in my own skin, because it gave me confidence.
Yes. And that's one thing that I've noticed since we first started talking. Your confidence, you are far more comfortable in your own skin than you've ever been from the early part. Not that it was terrible back then, but you just evolved. Your skills as a host is just phenomenal. But the idea that you can I'm all right with whatever. I don't have like people that would talk about me or criticize me or whatever. There's just no power in that to me anymore. It's something that I can't stop anybody from doing that, but I'm okay. I'm not affected by it. It's just, but also at the end of the day, they're just not people that are in my orbit. So doesn't matter. And you'll never be successful if you're constantly worried about what everybody's opinion of you is, because it's an impossible landmine, a field of landmines to walk through. You can never do that. You just have to say, look, these are my people. They're on this journey with me. Not everybody's going to get us. We won't have to. I don't have to everybody agree with 100%, but at the same time, I don't need a battle of, everybody's pulling in a different direction. It's just life's too short, and so many people do worry about what random people think about them, which I find
Hmm.
fascinating. Just a random person could upset you is baffling to me.
Yeah. Well, and there's also the other side of it too, which is, certainly we can be, negatively influenced in the way you just described by other people. And like you said, we could be in that flow of, I'm so worried about what it is that other person is thinking. But another way that the same kind of issue can manifest is I'm beating myself up all the time. I can never please myself. I can never, my perfection level is so high that I'm always, questioning my own, my thought process, my achievements, my things that I said. I'm doubting all over the place. And I'm the one who's doing it to me. No one's actually doing it to me. I'm the one who's doing it. It's not like I need any help in that department. I'm a one-man band. I can bury myself with that kind of stuff. It's
Yeah.
amazing. So I'm not sure which is even worse, to be honest. Is it worse to beat yourself up or to let somebody else beat you up?
Yeah, I think it's equally bad. Also one of right in that same ballpark of beating yourself up is making assumptions that other people are thinking a certain way,
Yeah.
So here's a good example. This lady friend of mine, we have a casual relationship over the years, very very compatible, and but it gets very casual, and it's
Hmm.
not it fits well. So we were having this text conversation the other day, and as you know, I've told you, I probably have 10 messages going separate people all the time, just
Yes.
constant things, and so not knowingly, I had just sort of stopped answering her. I didn't realize I'd done that.
Hmm.
And so she said, did I say something that upset you? And I go, what? No. And she goes, okay, what are you thinking right now? And I go, I'm thinking about glucose disposal agents, and I'm researching how they affect. And she said, what? I said, well, she said, see that? Well, what does that have to do with me? And I go, nothing. Sorry. I didn't know again, she had thought I just stopped talking because something she had said.
Mm.
And I just had so much going. I didn't realize her statement I didn't know needed a follow up, so to speak.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and then I said, just understanding, I'm not operating in an orbit where I would ever play a game like that. If something
Mm.
upset me, I would tell you I'm upset. I'm not operating like that. Trying to measure my brain by what your brain's thinking will never work out, because my brain, thank God, your brain is not like my brain.
I'm not sure which way that thank God goes either. It could be either way. I'm not sure.
Yeah, but I always tell somebody, this is a full-time job up here. This is a full-time job up here. So I love it, but man, there's days I'm like, can we take a day off?
Yeah, right.
It's a great brain, but a day off would be fantastic sometimes. But all kidding aside, there's people that make assumptions and they get upset about assumptions that they don't really know, and that's all of that same avenue. Sometimes people are upset with you. You never say anything. They're just assuming you're thinking something based on what they would have said.
Yeah. Yeah. Assumption, boy, that can get us into all kinds of trouble.
Well, and assuming that people think of the world and think of things. I love that statement. You can't expect you from other people.
Yeah.
You can't expect I love that statement, because I don't expect anybody to be thinking like I'm thinking. I just, unless you're, an ADD 14-year-old boy, that's my most connect. Hey, I relate to those guys the most. We have the crazy conversation, but because my clients are like, yeah. But a lot of people, it is something that they wouldn't really understand how my brain works. So assuming that I must be feeling, if I'm very clear, if I'm upset with you, or there's something bothering me, I will send you a message and say, this hit me the wrong way, or I will not, I don't play any games whatsoever. But also nothing upsets me, so I don't ever have to do that too much, you know? But not most people don't do that.
Well, I'm asking myself, so what is it that people do? And I'm realizing they do a lot of different things. I mean, there are certain commonalities that we have, but I've also come to realize, just from interviewing all the different people I've interviewed here on the podcast, as much as I like to try to find commonalities among things that they say and shared ideas and so forth, my God, they're all completely different people.
Sure.
I mean, like dramatically different.
Yeah.
And the moment that I'm trying to compartmentalize them, all I'm really doing is confusing myself.
Right. And we've, a few times, several times, we've interviewed people, and we've had some really interesting guests. And I love everybody's opinion. I love that. But everybody's very different. Everybody has their own thing. Even though we all sort of agree on the concepts of the law of attraction in general, that you wouldn't be on the show if you didn't. But how we got there and our beliefs within that are vastly different sometimes. And I'm good with that. It doesn't in any way affect me. I won't argue with people because I accept their belief system is working for them. I don't think there's this exclusive contract with the law of attraction that only works this way. I think so much of your own belief system plays a role in the energy you're putting out, and it's just that is the connection that we make. And it's really, with all that we have going on, the country and the dividedness and all that. We're being told that's out there, but my day-to-day operation, there's none of that going on. I don't run into that at all. I'm not looking for it, but I find very caring, kind people. There was this Instagram story. I love this story. There's this guy goes around and he's trying to help homeless people out. And there's this young man like 2 days ago, and he's very young guy, like 18, and he's been on the street since he's 17. I think one of his parents died and he had nowhere to go and he had no family. He's not a drug addict. He's just trying to live on the streets. He's clearly in shock. And this guy who does he does this on Instagram. He, gave him $500 and said, let's get you a hotel room and let's figure out what to do. And he said, let's get you a GoFundMe page and see if we can't get you enough to get a house. And so they tried to raise $20,000. And in one day, they raised $190,000 for the video.
Wow.
And, that didn't make the news the other day. That didn't make the news this is a crazy idea. There were some Muslims that gave money. There were some Jewish people that gave money. There were some black people that gave money, transgender people. There was some of everything giving money. And they all were touched by that story, and they all came together. $190,000 is enough to get him in school, get him a car, get his life. Now it's still up to him to do it, but he has a jump start all by this chance encounter. So when we hear that everything's falling apart, it's not the true story. It's just there's a million of those stories going on, and that doesn't make the news because it's not negative. It doesn't support the narrative.
Or perhaps another way to say it is, it doesn't have to be the true story. I mean, the story is true because we make it true.
Sure.
Right? So that means we can make whatever story we want true.
Right.
Which is just a mind shift. I say just as if it were a minor thing.
Just a mind shift.
Just a mind shift. Yeah, that's all. Just change your entire way of thinking for a moment.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I was talking to this neurosurgeon the other day about, he's strictly a surgeon. I don't mean that. I mean, what does that mean? I mean, he's an incredible surgeon. He's a neurosurgeon, super smart dude. But I'm talking about the subconscious, and all the other stuff, and he's like, look, I'm working on the hardware. You're talking about the software.
Yes.
And I'm like, that's a really good point. He goes, I'm an expert of the hardware, but I know nothing. Clearly, I know nothing about the software. And so I just thought that was such a really cool take that, he said, the hardware, I got that. He said, the software is the hardest part. He said, you work on the software. That's the hard part.
I'm reminded of the old discussions from the 1980s, the early age of the personal computer, and how Bill Gates ended up ultimately creating Microsoft Windows after he had created Microsoft Word and a few other apps. But Windows was where he was trying to get to, and he basically worked an agreement so that Intel would have all the hardware side and he would have the software side. And the people at Intel thought they had the better end of the deal.
Yeah.
And he thought he had the better end of the deal.
Yeah. While both did well, Bill did better.
Yeah. I think he kind of won that race. Yeah.
Yeah, he did. So, but again, I like today's topic because it just so much of we can boil it down to a couple points here, but your perspective dictates your reality, and your emotions are a guidance scale. They tell you where you're at. Knowing your emotions, and when you need to take a break, when your mind or body doesn't feel right, eliminate, find out what it is, eliminate, just keep eliminating until you find out what that is. And it's a great way to live. Our reality is, fantastic. I'm not saying this just because it's a standard statement you would expect me to say, but I cannot imagine. I have the perfect life. I love my life, and I built that by building my perspective of having the life I love. I didn't have the life I always thought I would have. I just took the life I had and fell in love with that life.
There's a topic for next week's conversation right there. But I'm so glad that you have been sharing that life with us and sharing it with me over the years, especially. I take so much value from that. So thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to next week's conversation, whether it's on that or something else. I don't know what we'll talk about next week. We should figure it out.
Okay, buddy.
It's all good. So thank you much. Thank you, podcast listeners everywhere. We will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.